Hi, my name is Jeff Morris, and I'm going to talk today about what's new in Couchbase Server. And what I'm really going to do is actually go through a quick review of some of the capabilities of Couchbase Server itself, and then I'll discuss some of the more recent release features that we've come up with and start to foreshadow what's coming up in the future. So, like I said, we'll give a quick background. We'll talk about Couchbase 6.6, which is our current release, and we'll start to discuss the new things coming up in Couchbase 7. So, as a quick review about the core capabilities of Couchbase, remember, we focus on three audiences. Number one, the developers, then the architects, then DevOps. So for developers, we really provide a great deal of capability with regard to being able to be flexible and agile and take advantage of the versatility of the platform. So when we talk about the multi-model capability, for example, the ability to support both key value stores and JSON documents at the same time as our format or our structure that, that we use. And then we also talk about being multi-mode. So we have super high performance because we have a memory-first architecture. We support ACID transactions, which oftentimes you don't see in one or the other. And we support operational and analytic workloads all at the same time. So you'll see this through our indexing, analytics, full text search, key value capabilities, memory-first architecture, et cetera, in this particular diagram. And of course, we're programmable, as we mentioned earlier in the keynote. So programmability means offering the developer the ability to have the schema flexibility to define whatever data they need or the application needs while they're building the application, and not have the database dictate what data is available to the developer. That's kind of old school. So we also support SQL in the form of our query language, Nickel. And it's got everything that you're accustomed to in the SQL language. And we have many sessions this week that talk about those parallels and those similarities. And finally, we have 10 different SDKs to allow you to focus on supporting or using the SDK of the language of your choice. So the developer really remains in control when they're building a Couchbase-based system, which is really important to us. Next up, for the architect, of course, we've always hung our hats on our ability to scale an environment really quite easily. And so we've characterized it as no hassle scale out. It's a shared nothing architecture, so we can expand or contract as necessary. It's asynchronous, so that one environment is not dependent on another at any given time. And it's elastic, as I just mentioned, so you can shrink and grow it as you need. We have built-in cross-data center replication, and this is a really popular feature amongst our customers. This allows us to deliver the data to as close to the users as we need, even if the application is globally deployed. And as I mentioned, it's always on, globally deployed, edge to cloud kind of deployment. So if you've got a mobile device, if you've got IoT, if you've got other edge computing kinds of environments, as well as a typical enterprise application, Couchbase is a really good fit for that. And finally, for DevOps, we've adopted a very cloud-native architecture. This includes capabilities like our workload isolation features that allow you to dictate using what we call multi-dimensional scaling, the ability to specify exactly how much resource any given one of our services it consumes when you deploy it on the cloud or when you deploy it in your own environment. We have automatic cluster rebalancing. This is really cool because you don't have to worry about how or where the data is stored. We'll fix that automatically for you. And of course, we're location and deployment agnostic. We don't care what cloud, we don't care where you're located. And it's all both Kubernetes, cloud native, and microservices friendly, which we'll continue to discuss. Now, one of the interesting things too is it's super high performance, and that's what my performance chart is articulating here. And this is based on a test that we performed very recently, comparing Couchbase Cloud, our newest product line offering, which came out in June, against its other cloud databases as a service competitors. And you can see that Couchbase Cloud is 4 to 5 times faster in this particular workload or this particular test than its nearest competitors. So node for node, we offer fantastic price performance, not only in the cloud, but also wherever you want to deploy Couchbase Server itself. So when we really talk about the benefits of Couchbase, we talk about the flexibility of JSON and the schema that you are afforded to build and take advantage of, but not required to do so. So you can store data as you like in multiple ways, whether it's list everything in a single document, perhaps as user attributes, or normalize it with references to other documents. That's also perfectly valid. Add new values when you need, support binary values as you need, and be able to access the data also however way you feel is most appropriate, whether it's going directly, programmably directly to key value, whether it's using the Nickel query language, SQL compatibility, whether it's using full text search because you don't know what the user's going to ask for before they do, or whether it's for analytics and taking advantage of our MPP architecture that can parallel process everywhere and then bring your data back, bring your results back accordingly. The key thing about using JSON as that base format for our structures is that really, unlike relational databases, it's the application developer who gets to dictate the structure of the data and the data that they need, rather than the relational database schema dictating the application structure, which is the more traditional model, let's say the turn of the century model that we grew up on and became used to. But nowadays, your applications want to be much more flexible than that. And that's really what Couchbase offers here, and the point we like to make on this JSON flexibility. It's really all about the developer's choice in being able to determine what data goes in and what data comes out of their application. And then we marry that with Nickel, which is our query language. And you'll notice right away, it sure looks like SQL, doesn't it? Well, that's because it's really compatible with ANSI SQL. You'll notice that we have very traditional SQL syntax, like select statements, where clauses, where filters, and et cetera. So a user who grew up on SQL, which is arguably most of us, is really familiar with what the kind of structures that we end up using inside of Couchbase. That gives you a huge advantage. You don't have to learn a brand new query language. And what's more important is, just like SQL, Nickel is a declarative language. And what that means is you tell it what you want and it figures out how to get it. Unlike other query languages, which are imperative, they actually require you to dictate exactly how to go get the data, which is much more cumbersome. You have to exactly know what you're going after before it will actually retrieve the results you want. Declarative languages are much more easily adopted and easy to operate. And as it turns out, they're also easier to performance tune, because we're the ones who end up controlling the guts of the application and environment, which I'll talk about in a minute. And what's another really unusual element here, especially for JSON-based document stores, is that Couchbase supports joins. And you don't see that in other applications or other document databases. You see odd lookup functions, you see no support for it at all. But here, Nickel supports join capabilities so that you can set up a variety of document structures, as I mentioned before, and emulate the kinds of things that you were doing in your relational systems anyway. So a much more familiar model, and actually, a much more performant model as well. So you're not duplicating data, as you might if you were storing everything in a single document. You can spread everything out and organize it exactly the way that you want. So joins is another huge advantage of Nickel over many of these other systems. So what we've talked about so far, and sort of the guts of Couchbase, this schema flexibility with JSON, right? It allows you to modify everything as you need. It allows the application to dictate the structure of the data rather than vice versa. We offer Nickel, right? As I mentioned, SQL for JSON, we often refer to it. It's got full create, read, update, delete support. It's super familiar. And then we've got our memory first data handling services. And this is important because you want your system to be performant. And memory, just like CPUs and disk space and hard drives, is dropping in price and continues to do so. So taking advantage of in-memory processing is indeed the fastest way to create a high-performance application. So our data handling services, the query service, the indexing service, the data control service, these are all the fundamental elements of Couchbase. They're in memory first. So they look to cache everything before we start reading back to physical disk. And it ultimately really does the work of multiple databases here. Now we also add to that a number of different services that you may have not thought of originally, but certainly as you're building your application or as your users start testing your application, they're functionality that you look for and you want. And as you'll recall in Ravi's keynote earlier, oftentimes you end up using a separate database or a separate system to support the kinds of things that Couchbase does natively, like full text search. Okay, it supports us the ability to build inverted indexes which allow searching documents much more rapidly. It's language aware. It performs its own scoring capabilities to tell you which is the most likely choice the user was looking for, and all of that is built in natively. And then we've got the analytics service. And there's a lot of sessions this week on analytics. But the analytics service allows us to, on the one hand, eliminate the impact of analytic exercises on operational systems or production systems, while still being able to get at and perform real-time analytic queries on operational data. We just create an analytics service environment for you to retrieve and store that information. And if you need to, if it's a big query, it sweeps a lot of data and aggregates a lot of data. It's MPP powered, so it'll parallel process queries across all of your cluster nodes as you have defined in order to get your results. So a really good high performance vehicle here, and it's only getting better, as you'll see in a moment. And then finally, the eventing service, because we all want that programmability. We want change data capture kinds of events to be supported in the environment. And that's what the eventing service does. And the beautiful part about that is it only requires knowledge of JavaScript. So it's a fairly familiar programming language within which to build capabilities that will either improve integration with other technologies or other elements of your application, and be able to fire off and communicate other activities based on changes in data values within your database. So super useful eventing capabilities here. And remember, these are all built in. And as we had talked about earlier, also remember that Couchbase itself is a converged system. It's the byproduct of an in-memory key value store and a JSON-based document store, and they were combined. A really unusual situation back in 2011, combining two open source projects and two open source companies at the same time. Well, we've built on that philosophy, as you saw in the keynote, where we're trying to adopt and incorporate adjacent ideas and technologies like full text search, like analytics, like SQL, such that we create the most robust environment and database by building on this convergence idea. You'll see other vendors try and do this, but nobody's doing it at the level of Couchbase is. And I'll keep getting into that as we continue in this presentation. So I love the elastic scaling architecture of Couchbase. Once you've got your application defined, in this particular setup, I have my sample development environment. It's 2 nodes because I'm working with a partner on the applications, and I have access to every capability inside of Couchbase. Super handy there. But then when I want to scale the system and perhaps test drive it, you see how it's going to perform, I can actually scale this out and allocate resources against every node in my cluster. I've moved from 2 to 4 here, and you can see that I'm spreading out my data service across all 4 nodes, as is the cluster manager. But then query and analytics and inventing are on two nodes independently of global indexing and full text search. So really, really handy in terms of allowing me to figure out what the real performance criteria are for my application and how Couchbase is going to behave within that environment. And then we get to production. And in production, I may have 13 nodes as I've deployed here. And the cool thing is I can allocate my service resources without changing any line of code inside my Couchbase implementation, dedicated to this kind of topology. So I can dedicate highly memory intensive nodes for indexing and query. And I can dedicate disk intensive and CPU intensive information for data and eventing perhaps. And then let analytics get another robust set of nodes. I can determine all of that myself because as the developer of the application, I certainly want that kind of control. And it gives me a lot more transparency and capability here in terms of refining exactly how an application behaves. So we talked about multidimensional scaling just there, right? Individually allocate these resources across your topology. Very, very cool. We have enterprise security built into the environment. And you can imagine that covers everything from data in transit, from mobile storage and how things are stored on your mobile device, across networks, across clouds, within clusters, and all the way down to disk. If you need to encrypt your data at disk, we can handle that. So everything that an enterprise expects out of a security architecture is built into Couchbase right now. We have our active clustering capabilities, and there's some really clever things in here, especially when you're trying to dynamically grow or shrink a cluster. We have automatic partitioning and data rebalancing within a cluster. All you have to say is do it, and it will go and rebalance a cluster if you add a node or two into the environment. And if you lose nodes or you shrink the cluster, we'll automatically rebalance everything back to what's left and available. So this is kind of a demonstration of this shared nothing architecture and how elastic it is. And then finally, everything is built to be highly available. It's built to support n number of failures as you determine, and certainly based on the number of nodes in a cluster you might deploy. And we support globally distributed clusters. So you can have clusters that are based in different, perhaps, cloud zones, rest in Virginia, Portland, Singapore, Frankfurt, right? All of these areas where we know that data resides, and we know that oftentimes data sovereignty regulations are needed to be adhered to. We support in Couchbase 6.5, and this is a really big feature that took a long time for us to implement. In 6.5, we added distributed ACID transactions. And what's interesting about that is that's multi-document transactions, and it could be globally distributed. So we will take and package an entire transaction as you need and make sure that everything succeeds before we end up accepting the transaction as being permanent. Now, that in itself is a pretty heavy-duty kind of requirement, and it's helping our customers adopt Couchbase as a uniform system of record, right? Because normally that would have been a job that Oracle would do, for example, with their history. But Couchbase can now perform the same kinds of things. And the beauty about our support for distributed ACID transactions is that we don't require you to do it every single time. It's a feature that you can choose to deploy or not based on the requirements of your application. So again, developers remain in control of this entire environment. And I mentioned earlier, we support cross-data center replication. This allows us to create an application that can be globally distributed and supply every user a fantastic user experience regardless of where they are. So again, deploy in the US, deploy in Europe, deploy in Australia or Singapore or wherever, and deliver that super low latency, highly performant experience to whatever the local users have, wherever they happen to be. This also supports geofiltering, as I mentioned, and supports a great set of features around high availability and backups. And this can move in and out of a cloud. It can move across clouds. Cross data center replication is indeed one of our customer favorites. And finally, we offer our Couchbase Autonomous Operator. And this is really our implementation of a Kubernetes-based orchestration and management extensions to Couchbase Server to allow you to become a cloud service provider yourself, or manage your Couchbase deployments as if you were your own database as a service. Autonomous Operator affords you this kind of capability. So you can automatically deploy, scale, upgrade, et cetera, your environment. It gives you great fine-grained control over your cluster and runs in every cloud. So when we dig a little deeper into that, right, there's some really clever things that Autonomous Operator does. Number one, supports auto provisioning, meaning that if you need to deploy a new node, no problem. If you need to upgrade your Couchbase deployment, no problem. If you need to rebalance and repartition and reallocate the different Couchbase services I mentioned using multidimensional scaling, you can. Right? This is capabilities that are built into Autonomous Operator to manage, and all you do is change a value in your YAML file, and there it's done. You'll, within minutes, you'll see the action being carried out within your Couchbase cluster. It supports automatic recovery from failures. It supports geographic distribution, as I mentioned. It gives you a centralized management environment in which to oversee all of your globally deployed Couchbase servers or clusters. And it works with Couchbase persistent storage, right? So we're breaking that odd barrier between the flexibility that Kubernetes offers for stateless applications, but carrying that into stateful applications like Couchbase, like a database, where you have to offer persistent storage. So really making things, the ability to support microservices and behave in a cloud native manner. And then finally, there's all of the maintenance and supportability features, like can I monitor my clusters using Prometheus? Yes. Can I scrape my logs and figure out what's going on and investigate errors? Yes. Can I investigate the operating performance of everything? Yes, no problem. All of those supportability capabilities are built into Autonomous Operator. And of course, this is another one of these products that, in addition to Couchbase Mobile, that we are featuring at Couchbase Connect this week and breaking news over. So the other interesting implementation of Couchbase Server is its deployment inside of Couchbase Cloud. And if I start to repeat myself because I sound like I'm talking about Autonomous Operator and Couchbase Server all over again, it's because I am. So Couchbase Cloud is a fully managed database as a service provided by us. We deploy inside of your virtual private cloud. It's available in AWS at the moment and through the AWS Marketplace. It will be available in Azure later on this year, and then following that, Google Cloud Platform. So it's this expertly managed environment of Couchbase. We love that. It delivers incredible performance, as I just showed you on that first slide, when going head to head or cluster to cluster against our closest competitors. Now, we deploy in an unusual way, but we feel that this is an emerging best practice, almost as if you were controlling the security of your database and your data and owning your own data center. And what I mean by this is we support what we call in-VPC deployment. So we put our software in your VPC, in your cloud, and we manage it for you. Now we have special access privileges that offer the least accessible privilege to manage and oversee the activity of Couchbase, but we never see your data. And customers love this because they maintain ownership and control of their data at all times, 100% of the time. If they choose to turn Couchbase off for whatever reason, they can do so, and they never lose control of their data. Unlike other databases as a service that are actually also provide the infrastructure at the same time, they actually are controlling your data rather than allowing you to control that. And so we feel that this MVPC security capability is a big deal for us. We offer the same kind of complete cluster control as I talked about with Autonomous Operator, but with Couchbase Cloud, it's elevated another level to the point where you can oversee all of your clusters from a single control console, single pane of glass. And we don't care where those clusters are deployed. It could be all over the world. It could be on-prem and in your cloud. and you can access and manage, upgrade, et cetera, all of those nodes all at once. We do support global deployments. So if you have a worldwide application and you need to deploy it in multiple regions, that's not a problem. And when you combine a couple of things, the superior performance, the super transparency of our licensing policies, and just the raw discounting power that we offer you when you license Couchbase Cloud, the combination of those three items delivers you incredible total cost of ownership benefits, especially when you combine that with the buying power that you have when you choose reserved instances or or buy your services in bulk from your cloud service provider. So really incredible TCO. We'll talk about that on Thursday. Now, finally, some of the use cases that Couchbase is really well accustomed to right now, and we see our customers deploying all the time, they end up kind of fitting into these four categories. Number one is personalization. And this takes the form of like a user profile or a session management capability where we're caching activity as perhaps your users or your legacy systems are getting hit, but you need to provide a high performance interface to end users and the outside world. So this allows you to create these custom experiences in real time, either based on aggregate data from multiple systems or aggregate customer data, recommendations, user profiles, et cetera. That oftentimes turns into a customer 360 kind of environment where you want to craft a single view of all of your customer activity and behavior. So then maybe we incorporate more different types of activities, to improve that overall experience and operational visibility. And next is on the opposite, the customer side, is what you're delivering to the customer in the form of catalogs. And we see a number of organizations who have immense number, millions of SKUs or millions of products that they're offering or that are choices to customers. And a document data store like Couchbase is absolutely perfect for this kind of application. So you can deliver relevant products to your customers in an instant. Right, you can make sure this environment scales to millions like many of our customers do. Amadeus comes to mind, doing 15 billion transactions per second kind of thing. Really incredible volumes. And serving your audience and keeping them engaged by offering them exactly the kinds of things that they're looking for. And finally, if you are embarking upon digital transformation initiatives, we find our customers are doing exactly that too. And one of the biggest drivers where we're seeing activity is in the mobile space. And we have a number of sessions here at the conference that are discussing mobile application deployments. And what's really clever about Couchbase's approach to this is the fact that we design everything as if all the systems are going to be offline at any given time or intermittently. So this offline first mentality really drives a lot of those core requirements like peer-to-peer syncing, or like syncing among, replication among our synchronization gateways or within the environment. So we'll be making news this week about Couchbase Mobile. So do check your press activity and/or check some of those sessions later on today that talk about Couchbase Mobile. So I want to get into now what came out in Couchbase 6.6. We'll cover it very quickly. But there's some really, really clever features in here that people ought to both know about and appreciate. So kind of working our way up to what's really big is number one, we now support polygons inside of our search capability. So you can make searches like within this set of blocks, how many Starbucks are there? Or you can also do the opposite, say within a mile radius of my location, where's a gas station? Right, those kind of geospatial search capabilities are now available inside of Couchbase. In the eventing service, we added timer functions. So this allows you to start, stop timers or activities or events that the system is programmed to do. So it gives you a huge amount of new flexibility and new capabilities inside of the eventing service to recognize when a data value changes. But maybe it doesn't matter if it changed, if it's after midnight, right? Those kind of events are now possible with the eventing service, within the eventing service. And finally, we've dramatically improved our support for AWS S3. And that's in a couple of areas. Number one, in this particular case, is we have the ability to take backups to S3 directly. So that could be an on-premises system that you've deployed, back it up to the cloud. Or it could be a cloud system you've deployed, back it up to a different set of EC2 S3 buckets in the cloud. And it works with S3 directly or any S3 compatible object store. Now here's the next level of really cleverness that we put into the product. Number one is the index advisor. And this is this has been in developer preview for some time. It entered developer preview in Couchbase 6.5, which came out back in January of 2020. And what this allows you to do is, given a query that you've written, whether you're inside of the Couchbase interface, or whether you actually just have a query and want to post it to our website, we have a service, an online service available there at this URL, index-advisor.couchbase.com. You can paste that query into the advisory service and hit suggest, and it will come back and tell you the indexes that you need to build to optimally run that query. And so what's really cool here is inside of the Couchbase environment 6.6, you can do that automatically and then immediately create that index. So that probably saves you what? I don't know, 20 minutes a query every single day, nearly every single query or every single complicated one. You'll automatically know which is the right index to be selecting. So that's pretty cool. But then carry that forward, and support older Couchbase deployments. Perhaps you're not yet on 6.6. You can take your existing query and pose it to this advisory service that's available online, and it will do the same thing. It'll tell you exactly the code snippet to grab and put into your Couchbase environment to build that index. So great feature, again, saves probably on a daily basis a lot of incremental time for someone to even be chewing on exactly how to make this any given query performant. Now let's move ahead to the Flex Index, and this is even cooler. And this is another example of that convergence idea that we talked about earlier. And really the convergence in Flex Index's case, the convergence is of NCL, the query language, which looks like SQL and behaves like SQL, the indexing services that Couchbase has, and the full text search service that Couchbase has. So it's kind of the combination of all three of those are married together to offer or create this Flex Index capability. And what it allows you to do is identify and use the full text search indexing capabilities when a NCL query has a lot of parameters inside of its where clause, a lot of a really complex where clause predicate. And so it could be, oftentimes you see forms that users will fill out. They have a lot of selections, like every field might have 10 selections inside of them. But if you offer a search that has 20 fields and 10 selections each, you're looking at 200 different permutations of, actually it's maybe more than that, of query choices. So that gets really complex to figure out how to index that thing. So what we did instead was we applied the full text search index and its capabilities to that query capability. And so you can call the Flex Index and have it choose the full text search index, and it'll find everything really, really fast for you. We have actually submitted a patent for this because there's not ever been a query language, a SQL-like query language that's actually accessing full text search kind of indexing. So do look at that. Very, very clever, and ultimately gives your users a phenomenal user experience. So last up are the investment that we made in the analytics service. And today you'll see a lot, both today and throughout the course of the rest of the week, many sessions on Couchbase Analytics. And really it's the maturation of the analytics service altogether in 6.6. Now it does a nice job of supporting hybrid transactional and analytic application processing. That's what we mean by HTAP right there. So there's two really clever features inside of analytics that we've just released. The first one is called remote links. And what this does is it allows us to create a dedicated analytic cluster using only the analytics service or however much of the analytics service you want to deploy, and allow it to access multiple Couchbase clusters. Okay, so you could have the Couchbase cluster that's supporting customer support on the left. You could have the shopping cart application in the middle. You could have the social media application on the right-hand side. Each of those be different Couchbase clusters and different Couchbase applications, but all using remote links to feed the analytic cluster by which you'll then go and perform near real-time analytic exercises against it. So maybe you want to create a custom offer based on the shopping cart and via social for a particular customer. You can do that and identify exactly what channel, what product to offer, et cetera, through that analytic exercise. So it really blends that analytic and operational sets of tasks. Again, convergence. And the last one here is being able to analyze data from S3 without importing that data into Couchbase. You can just access it directly. We bring it in memory. We can combine and join it with Couchbase data and then enhance the analytic exercises that you're performing. So maybe you need a tax table. Maybe you need a new product list or a new price list to come out of S3. Very, very easy to incorporate. And again, we have demos about this all week long at this particular event. And so it begins to support our ability to access data. Let's say you have an Athena data lake kind of thing. Very, very simple to incorporate that data in a Couchbase set of analytic exercises. So that was 6.6. Now let's talk about what's coming up in Couchbase 7.0. And what's really important here is to first let everyone know that Couchbase 7.0 we've been working on for quite a while. Some of the features that we have in it have also been in developer preview for quite a while, and we're carrying them forward. So, number one feature, this is pretty big, is the ability to support collections and scopes. And in NoSQL parlance, collections is a collection of documents. When you map that back to what a relational database expects, documents are like rows in a table. Therefore, a collection is kind of like a table. And then you add in the notion of a scope, and that begins to define the structure of collections or the structure of tables that are available to you inside of a bucket or a database. So I'm using Couchbase terms like bucket, scope, collection, document against a relational set of terms like database, schema, table, row. So very, very powerful feature because it allows us to more appropriately and better match relational ideas into the NoSQL space to allow more people to come and enjoy NoSQL. The scalability, the flexibility, the ability to rapidly deploy systems, the ability to support CI/CD kinds of deployments, right? That's the benefit of collections. So it allows us to create this single mapping from the relational model, which we really are very excited about. And another really obvious use case for this is to support multi-tenancy. So we can support up to like thousands of tenants per cluster in this, based on collections or scopes within this architectural design, because the implementation also incorporates all of the appropriate security permissions that you want to apply to a scope, like that could be the schema, to a database, that could be the bucket, to a set of tables, that could be the collections themselves. So we have authorization and access controls at every one of these levels to help you define what is a tenant, right? What are the schema and the tables that and collections they're allowed access to? What are the documents that a user is allowed to see? All of that is driven from this collection support. And finally, the other really interesting thing is indexing gets a great performance boost because indexes can be created at the collection level instead of just at the entire bucket level. So your indexes are smaller and therefore faster, right? So all of this is going to dramatically improve performance of Couchbase in addition to giving you this core set of relational mapping functionality. So And it works, like I said, with role-based access. It works with cross-data center replication, where you can remap and filter data wherever it's supposed to go. It even works with restore and backup capabilities. So let's look at that. And so when we have this multi-tenant deployment of using, we'll characterize a customer and scope a schema to each customer. And here I have my my bucket of sales and my bucket of customers. So I've got orders on one side and who's buying them and getting them on the other. And then you can see scope by scope. On the left-hand side, I've got customer 1 and customer 2. I have their orders and their shipments. And then on the right-hand side, I have who those customers are, right? Individuals and what accounts they are on the opposite side. And my access control mechanisms are keeping track of which scope goes along with, and which set of collections goes along with which scope. So I'm logically isolating all of my data on a tenant by tenant basis without necessarily having to create completely separate buckets or completely separate cluster deployments to support a multi-tenant architecture. So big advancement here. So let's keep thinking about that for a second. So not only is collections, a structural design change for Couchbase to the positive, but also we incorporate collections into NCL itself, right? And so imagine the effect of all of the downstream effect of all of this inside of every service of Couchbase Server. So in NCL gets collections and scope capability. NCL also is going to adopt the transactional capabilities that are now in the SDKs. So that multi-document distributed transactions will be available in NCL as well. We're setting up memory quotas so that you can allocate, how much memory does any service use or any other elements use based on this memory quota definition. We're adding user-defined functions into the environment. So carry the eventing idea even further to UDFs is sort of where this is leading. The index advisor continues to gain investment, as well as a brand new cost-based optimizer for queries. So now we'll be able to tell you exactly what the right both indexing structure and optimization strategy is for any given query. So all of these, again, are capability query enhancements inside of Couchbase 7. So I've gone through a lot, but I want to keep talking about this idea of being a convergent technology and how convenient that happens to be. So think about this Flex Index capability. Flex Index would not have been possible if we did not have a native query service, a native indexing service, and full text search all in the same space, all in the same environment. I couldn't have done that because of the adjacencies. I couldn't have thought of that idea. I didn't think of it, but our developers did. Index Advisor, same kind of thing. If I didn't have all of these core capabilities available to us, we wouldn't have built out this second or third generation kind of function. S3 backup, because everything is becoming more and more cloud native. Supporting cloud native technologies is indeed very important for an organization like ourselves. Couchbase Cloud will use this. Our Couchbase Autonomous Operator uses this, and Couchbase Server itself can use this. Mobile 2.8 gains some great capabilities you'll see about next in terms of replication. We now support replication among or across sync gateways. We improve our peer-to-peer syncing capabilities. We have tons of awesome mobile use cases in this particular event. We're supporting deeper edge computing capabilities, and as of Wednesday today, everything has Couchbase 2.8, excuse me, is available. Next up is going to be Autonomous Operator 2.1, which gives us improved capabilities for monitoring and creating chargeback accounts for across your different divisions or parts of the organization. And we're going to integrate more effectively with provide service broker integrations. And finally, as I mentioned, the scopes and collections in Couchbase 7, right, to not only give us relational friendly capabilities so that developers of older or of relational-based database applications can move forward into NoSQL, but also so that NoSQL can move forward into cloud-native capabilities like microservices much more easily. So those kind of core capabilities out of collections and scopes is also going to be really important. And we showed you a little clever example in our demo earlier today on how CI/CD friendly this environment is. And one more thing. This is for the developers and the community out there. Couchbase 7.0 beta will be available in November simultaneously for Community Edition and Enterprise Editions at the same time. And typically we had not done that, but we have been listening to the developer community. We have been investing in our support for SAME. And so this is yet another example. We just redid our developer portal. You saw the Couchbase.live environment. We're coming out with self-service trials of Couchbase Cloud coming up. So all of these are designed to make ourselves more accessible to the development community. And again, that's why Couchbase Connect Online is now our premier developer conference. So this too, really big deal. We're very excited about this, and you can look for, this will be the beta release of 7.0, and we want both customer participation as well as community participation and feedback in these activities. So some of my favorite sessions of other things that I would encourage you to go watch is coming up shortly after this presentation is Keshav doing What's New in Nickel. Right, he is the Nickel evangelist inside of Couchbase. He's one of our software development VPs. We have Ben Lee, who has been working as a product manager in charge of this flex indexing capability, another killer feature. And then we've got Kamini, who's going to take the guesswork out of the index advisor, right? Again, promoting what I was just talking about. My buddy Dennis Souza is going to talk about managing schema in a schemaless world. John is going to talk about the eventing capabilities, and Shivani is going to talk about collections and scopes even more so. So these are all the deep dive sessions on everything I just covered here. And they happen both today, one's today, most are tomorrow, and Shivani's is on Friday. So I hope you enjoy the rest of Couchbase Connect Online. We hope that you develop your path to the solution of your dreams kind of thing. And I will be available both immediately following this event as well as online all the time. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.